Drigong.
Sorry.
So Pakmo Drupa wrote this text. It is one could call it a Lamrim text,
Huh?
because I think, yeah, I think, you could say it's a Lamrim text, but to be more exact, it's what's known as Tenrim. Lam is path, Ten is like the Buddha's teachings, Tenrim. So it's like the stages of the Buddha's teachings, rather than the stages of the path. So this Tenrim is a little, it's, well, not a little, it's significantly shorter than Gampopa's famous jewel ornament.
Mhm.
So not as extensive as Gampopa's jewel ornament, much more concise, less chords, and then also the area covered is less. But it's a good kind of like foundations of Tibetan Buddhist teachings.
That's great.
Yeah.
Very, very appropriate.
I think I sent it to your
Yeah, let me see.
Um,
I'm just figuring out now how to send it to their phone, sorry.
Stages.
yeah, and if you have an iPad, then you can just use that
Yeah,
class, and you don't then need to stress about the book.
I can do that. I can read it on
It's
my.
a little harder to read from the phone, but
Mhm.
Okay,
so
great.
basically, this book consists of Pakmo Drupa's root text, which is written in verses, and it's very brief, again, like 2 pages, followed by Pakmo Drupa's own commentary on his root text.
Okay. Sounds exciting.
Yeah,
A systematic review of our view of everything.
yeah.
Like that.
Um, yeah, so the root verses in the PDF is page 2 and 3.
Okay.
And then from page 4 onwards, to the end of 130 odd pages, is Pakmo Drupa's own auto commentary on the root verses. Yeah, so the ground, he covers, so to say, is the, meditating on, reflecting, cultivating an awareness of how difficult and amazing it is that we have obtained this human life with the endowments and leisures, then cultivating an awareness of death, the disadvantages of cyclic existence. So, so that's at the beginning. So it roughly corresponds with what we know as the four thoughts that turn the mind, although it doesn't seem like right here he directly addresses the karma. Of course, it's there, but it's just not, explicitly. Then he says, from there, developing this mind that turns away from cyclic existence. So first, the first two he identifies as using the first two to turn away from being, you know, engrossed with activities of this world like this life. Then contemplating the disadvantages of the secular existence, no matter how high, a position you are born in, how good a zip code that you're born in, that your school is at, if they are not reliable. So then the mind turns away from secular existence itself and the intention to achieve liberation. And then from there, the topic is refuge, who can provide reliable refuge for what we want to free ourselves from. Then how to take refuge and the trainings involved in taking refuge. And then meditating on cause and the results. So he arranges it a little differently.
Mhm.
Because, both samsara and nirvana have their causes, and their causes are never mistaken. So therefore, we have to develop trust, he says, confidence in cause and effect. And then, in that regard, to purify past negative karma, and to make a commitment and to practice restraint with regards to present and future negative karma. Then to do that, we take the vow of individual liberation or personal liberation. I think I like that better now, personal liberation.
Mhm.
So we take the vows related to personal liberation. Then from there, on to universal liberation, right? The Bodhisattva vow. That he talks about, that, how to train in that, how to meditate on love and compassion. Then on the basis of that, generating bodhicitta, how to take those vows, how to practice the vows, how to protect those vows. And then this is the relative bodhicitta. Then to meditate on inseparable emptiness compassion, which is the ultimate bodhicitta. And through that, through the practicing of the two bodhicittas, attaining the three kayas. So that's his, basically, the root text on page 1, 2, and 3.
Does it go into Vajrayana or it stops at Bodhisattva?
No, it doesn't go into Vajrayana.
Okay.
Yeah. Just like, neither does the jewel ornament of liberation.
Right.
Under the chapter on wisdom, the jewel ornament of liberation quotes very liberally from the Mahasiddhas Vajra songs and quotes from Tantras, but there is no explicit discussion of, and this is how you practice, Vajrayana.
Mhm. Okay.
Yep.
Yay.
Yeah, so Pakmo Drupa himself was someone who was highly educated in Vajrayana, actually. In some ways, you could say he was more educated on Vajrayana than his teacher, Gampopa. Prior to coming to Gampopa, he was already a well-established teacher, teaching the system known as Lamdre, which is the path and its fruit. Lamdre, the path and its fruit. And the Lamdre system is today most closely identified with the Sakyapas. So Pakmo Drupa himself trained with the great Sakyapa masters and became an authority himself in that particular approach. Then he met Gampopa. He came to Gampopa with the intention to discredit Gampopa. That Gampopa's understanding was flawed and mistaken and to be defeated so that the true Dharma isn't compromised by such charlatans. And then he himself got stuck there and then did not return to his former place. But I don't want to give the impression that there was a lot of sectarian feelings, you know. No, because like it's very clear that they continued, you know, to revere him as an authority in the Lamdre system that he was trained in prior to meeting Gampopa. So you could say that he held like dual lineage, and people continued to consult him, and he continued to teach the people who consulted him on that topic of Lamdre, right? Even though he, you could say, switched allegiance later in life to further his training with Gampopa. Yeah, so then when he gathered his own disciples, it is, we learn in Jigten Sumgen's biography that Gampopa was a teacher who himself had 500 disciples who were themselves teachers in their own, you know, kind of capacity. So Pakmo Drupa attracted, you know, very prominent figures of his time, and they studied with him. It said that these are 500, they say, parasol bearing monks. And that's a way of saying that, you know, people held parasols above their heads, you know, meaning that they were themselves teachers. So Pakmo Drupa in particular, his closest student and attendant, is the founder of what is known as the Talong Kagyu. Talong Kagyu today is very, very weak, you know, reduced to maybe 2 handfuls of monasteries scattered throughout eastern Tibet.
Can you spell that, the name of it? The Dalum?
Taklung, Daklung.
Daklung. Okay.
Talong Kagyu. So Talong Kagyu now is very weak. Even Talong Kagyu monasteries that are functioning and active aren't necessarily focused on Talong Kagyu practices.
Yeah.
They have come under very strong Nyingma influence. So that there's not much of like, but Talong, my point is that the founder of Talong Kagyu, Talong Tangpa was his name, or one of his names, Talong Tangpa. Tang means plains, you know, the plains of Talong. So Talong Tangpa, the guy from the Talong plains. So Talong Tangpa inherited Pakmo Drupa's learning in terms of like the sophisticated tantric commentarial tradition. See, going back to Milarepa, although he spent a good number of years with Marpa, he did not necessarily inherit Marpa's, the range of Marpa's knowledge in the Tantras. So much later, not during their time, Tibetans like to try to, kind of streamline, things, so to say. Believe it or not, they do try that. Of course, this is all in the face of how unruly, right, the whole body of material and traditions is. But yes, they do try to streamline. So later traditions, definitely not during the time of Milarepa. Later traditions will say that Marpa had two streams that he transmitted. One is called the Shegyun. She is knowledge. So the knowledge stream, gyun as in stream, literally. And then the drup gyun. Drup is both, drup is the Tibetan word for the Sanskrit word siddhi. So siddhi, in terms of drup, has both the meaning of practice as well as attainment. So that's an interesting Tibetan word, drup, drupa has both the connotation of practice and attainment. To practice is to attain. So that's a very nice. To practice is to attain, to achieve. And so don't think, my practice, I'm not achieving anything. No, you are. It's just that what you're achieving is not so discernible to you right now. But any effort put into practice is getting you attainments, achievements. So sometimes you have heard, right, this expression, the practice lineage.
Yeah.
So that's drupgyu, gyu, drupgyu, practice lineage. So Kagyu's alternative name is the practice lineage, the drupgyu. So anyway, later traditions will say that Marpa has these two streams, the Shegyun and the Drupgyun. Gyun as in stream, rather lineage, but they're cognates, Gyun and Gyut. So they say that Milarepa is the chief inheritor of the Drupgyun, the practice / achievement stream, whereas the other prominent disciple, Ngo Choku Dorje, in Milarepa's biography, he is identified as Lama Ngo, which is a title. Back then, the title Lama is not just any, Tenzin, Pasang, and Tom, Dick, and Harry. Tenzin, Roma, and Pasang, it's Lama, Back then, Lama means like, guru, right? So Lama Ngo, whom maybe some of you remember, when Milarepa came to ask for instructions from Marpa and Marpa refused, then Marpa's wife said, hey, I tell you what, you go to this guy, he is basically, he knows everything that, my husband knows because he has received everything from my husband. So you go to him and I'll write you an introduction letter, which she forged, right? A letter in her husband's name and gave to Milarepa to go to Lama Ngo. So Lama Ngo is the one with the Shegyun, the knowledge stream. So I digress. So Milarepa himself, wasn't necessarily trained in like Vajrayana theory and exegesis, explaining all the ins and the outs and the, being able to harmonize or, overcome like different, like, different texts saying different things, all of that. So he didn't spend time learning those things. So what we call Kagyupas in the early period also didn't have that because Milarepa didn't have it. So Milarepa didn't give to Gampopa. Gampopa was very much trained in the Lojong tradition by his Kadampa teachers. So that's why Lojong is very strongly emphasized, with or without that word Lojong in the Kagyupa. Because really, more and more, as I look at the history and the early Kagyupas, I think they were almost considered like a weird sublineage of Kadampas. The Kadampas who got involved with Milarepa, basically. And later biographies of Milarepa would have Milarepa saying some uncharitable things about the Kadampa. And I think that's a later attempt to kind of, insulate Kagyupas from the competing Kadampa. So this is like 14th century politics written back into 11th century, 10th century realities. 10, 11, 12th century, I think, yeah, sure, people disagreed, but there weren't that much sectarian differences. And people disagreed strongly, but then also I think the notion of like, well, different people do different things. Yes, so Pakmo Drupa's Sakyapa training, and the Sakyapas were the consummate scholars in Vajrayana theory and practice, especially the theory and the exegesis of tantric material. The Sakyapas were like consummate scholars in that. They are the ones who read the commentaries, the sub-commentaries, the sub-sub-commentaries, the sub-sub-sub-commentaries, And so Pakmo Drupa was an authority in that area. So that body of knowledge, he actually, Talong Tangpa got all of them, and various other senior disciples of Pakmo Drupa. So in terms of Drigong Kagyu, Jigten Sumgun himself did not get much of that from Pakmo Drupa. Jigten Sumgun turned up towards the end of Pakmo Drupa's life and spent about 3 years, I think, or a little less or a little more, somewhere thereabouts with Pakmo Drupa. And it is said that by that point, Pakmo Drupa wasn't that interested in teaching the tantric theory. So Jigten Sumgun, after Pakmo Drupa passed away, when he ran into difficulties in his own practice, although he was in retreat, he would come out of retreat and go look for Pakmo Drupa's older disciples, especially those disciples trained in the Lamdre system. Again, because the Lamdre system is famous for knowing so much about Tantra, So when Jigten Sumgun ran into problems, he thought maybe these guys schooled in Lamdre may have insights on how I can overcome this or that obstacle, getting stuck, in his practice. Like, I mean, us even in our, way, way, way more mundane level, right? We feel like, oh, I'm feeling a little stuck. I need some inspiration. Let me go on pilgrimage. Oh, I feel a little stuck. Let me go attend a retreat. Go do some program with this or that lama. So same. So Jigten Sumgun went looking for his senior Dharma brothers to see if they can help him break through, where he got stuck. And so often it would say that, he went to consult these senior Dharma brothers who inherited Pakmo Drupa's tantric learning. And again, Pakmo Drupa did not really need tantric learning from Gampopa. Yeah. he needed like something else from Gampopa. Just as Gampopa needed something from Milarepa. This is who, kind of Pakmo Drupa was, and Pakmo Drupa was famously led a very simple and maybe from our perspective austere life. He had a hut, that they put together for him, and then disciples all started to come from different places and gather around him. And his rule for them is, if you want to settle and live here in this community, you have one day to, put up your shack. After one day, that's it. Don't fuss with your shack anymore. It's not worth it. All your efforts should go into training. So it was Pakmo Drupa who apparently started the convention of every month during I believe during the increasing weeks, right? The waxing moon. That's intensive practice all day long. So everybody will be in their own shack, cabins, doing practice. Then in the waning days of the month, right? In the morning, he would teach either sometimes individually, meaning people would come to his hut and individually to seek counsel, or he might schedule some group teachings that he would give in the mornings, and then in the afternoons, again, you go back to your own space to practice. So Pakmo Drupa like had that schedule, and then later on Jigten Sumgun and some of Jigten Sumgun's students followed this tradition. So hence the practice lineage. That means like you can see how, right, 3/4 of the month is basically personal practice. So yeah, so he led a simple, austere life, but he attracted a lot of students. And he is the originator of like at least 8 subdivisions within the Kagyu. So in the Karma Kagyu prayer, they talk about the 4 major and 8 minor traditions, Che and Chung. But major and minor didn't really refer to numbers. Major and minor in the sense of these were lineages founded by Gampopa's immediate disciples, and minor are traditions founded by Gampopa's great disciples, meaning Pakmo Drupa's students. So Pakmo Drupa was very productive, within his lifetime. Right? 8 of his students went on to establish their own centers of learning and practice across Tibet. So these include Drigung Kagyu, then Talong Kagyu, Barom Kagyu. Barom Kagyu, the family line is Duku Ugyen's family is part of the Barom family line. But Barom Kagyu don't exist as independent lineage now. Then there are 5 more that also don't exist as independent lineages. The ones that do continue as individual lineages is Drigong Kagyu, Drupa Kagyu, and Talong Kagyu. But Talong Kagyu, as I said, very small, very weak. technically, Pakcho Rinpoche is one of the heads of the Eastern Tatlong Kagyus. Yeah, but his title is a Tatlong title, Pakcho. And so Tatlong Kagyu, at some point in their history, became kind of two traditions, divided geographically. Central Tibet, they're called Martang Kagyu, Martang Tatlong, and then there is the Rivoche Tatlong, which is the Eastern Tibet. So Pakcho Rinpoche is, those of you who know that name, Pakcho Rinpoche is one of the three heads of the Eastern Tatlong. The Central Tatlong also have three heads. Oh, to say three heads means like three like important tugus. Yeah. So Pakcho Rinpoche is, the title comes from the Eastern Tatlong. Yeah, so some of the history. Questions? Any and all questions?
I was kind of wondering, the, I don't know, is there any gossip about, what,
There's always gossip about it. It's
I know.
whether
Pakmo
it's come to
Drupa,
my ears or not.
well, when Pakmo Drupa appeared to set Gampopa straight, was that a seduction or was that a conflict or was that just an immediate like, oh, never mind, and he became a student. The transition from coming in to set Gampopa straight or expose him or whatever to like becoming a student of his.
Oh yeah, there's good records of what happened. I don't remember the details, but if you look at this book, there's some there, but I think the author Rinpoche took out the more kind of like sharp words. The great Kagyu masters, that book may have in Pakmo Drupa's biography. In fact, not in this collection. I mean, not in the PDF text, but if you buy the book, the one copy left on Amazon, the life of Pakmo Drupa is given there.
Okay.
But I remember what happened. Okay, so one of the more like kind of like the story was that so Gampopa was gaining a lot of attention, and of course then people started to talk about his teachings and his understanding and all of that. And so among the Sakyapa group, they took issue with Gampopa's increasing, or they took issue with Gampopa seemingly saying that to become enlightened, you don't need all aspects of Vajrayana training. To really simplify the disagreement, even maybe oversimplifying the disagreement, it has something to do with Gampopa's seemingly saying enlightenment, Buddhahood can be achieved without literally practicing everything that you find in the Tantras. And that became one of the things that the Sakyapas found to be inconsistent and objectionable. So much so that they started to, and we don't know if this, or I don't know, if this was something that happened later and read back into this period, or even at this period, people started mm, to accuse, no, this period even, to accuse Gampopa as reviving a heresy that was put to rest a couple of centuries back. And what was this heresy? It's the heresy of the Zen people.
The Zen people,
Zen, yeah.
China,
Like Chinese Chan
yeah.
heresy. That apparently was circulating in the first transmission of Buddhism during the time of Guru Rinpoche.
Mhm.
And that King Tristan Detsen convened this so-called Council of Samye. Like apparently there was this big like debate at Samye Monastery. Imagine on the scale of like debates between Hindus and Buddhists in India and Buddhists in India. You know, there are all these. You know, one of the favorite pastimes of Indian kings is to host these religious debates, and whoever loses have to convert. And routinely, people are forced to convert back and forth, depending on who wins. Yeah? So imagine like the purpose of soccer games is conversion. If Manchester United won, you all have to be Anglicans until the Catholic team wins the next
Oh,
game. Everyone has to convert to Catholicism. So, so they say, although now scholars, historians say that the Council of Samye was more imaginary than actual. There were letters that was written back and forth, you know, between different factions, but that there was such a council that the king made a decree. So according to the mythology, King Tristan Detsen, after hearing the debate and served as a judge and said to the Chinese, you guys have lost the debate to the Indians, and so your understanding of the Dharma henceforth should not be taught in my land because it will only cause confusion. So the king did not quite say, you are wrong. He simply said, you lost. And for the sake of, not introducing too much confusion, you are not allowed to teach here and you are expelled. And so the story says they were banished, across the border and said, don't come back. So there are aspects of what these Chinese Chan masters were teaching. In fact, one of them may have been a Korean. So interestingly,
hmm.
that that what they taught, mm, the Sakyapas, when they objected to Gampopa, they said that Gampopa's teachings is suspiciously similar to this Chan heresy that was banished. So Gampopa and his disciples, generally speaking, had took two they responded in two ways. One is to bend over backwards to show how they are not the Chan heresy, and the other is to say, whatever your claims are, go ahead, it's simply not true. So
Yeah.
one is denial, and one is, mm, yeah, to prove that we are not, and bend over backwards to prove that we are not. How? By criticizing the Chan tradition and saying, yes, they are wrong and really, 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 really wrong. Therefore, we must not be talking about ourselves.
Yeah. What's kind of interesting, it's like Chinese culture has such a tradition of harmony, you know, and it sounds like the king was actually using that as a way of, we need harmony in Tibet in
Mhm.
terms of we don't need any kind of like conflict of stuff, and so we're just we're going to preserve our harmony here. But
Yes.
but then it becomes later,
Yeah.
heresy
It's
rather than.
unclear exactly if the king made such a, it's from much later sources that we hear the king saying, you guys better go back to the other side of the border. Some historians said that it might actually again have to do with later political realities. And so then this debate became a metaphor as well for Tibetans choosing Indian rather than Chinese influence because their Chinese neighbors are more dangerous than their Indian neighbors.
Mm.
Yeah, because the Indians, never in their right mind thought about going up to the snow mountains. But apparently the Chinese were more adventurous. And as we know now, they have occupied Tibet.
Well, did they, and the Chinese and the Tibetans Tibetans were always kind of, attacking China too, right? I mean, wasn't they were adversaries?
At that point, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, at that point. But then soon it wasn't so much about the Chinese and the Tibetans. It was mostly the Mongols and the Tibetans.
Um,
Yeah. It's just that the Mongols are no longer powerful today. And so then we tend to think of like the history of Tibet as mostly negotiating China's influence. But no, actually it was much more about how to deal with the Mongols who routinely marched into Tibet and took over monasteries and kill this or that person and burn down this or that. Some of our like throne holders in Drigong were kidnapped by the Mongols and held hostage in Mongolia. Um, so it was the various feuding factions. Yeah? So Mongols weren't like one big happy family either. So various branches of the Mongols were marching left and right and up and down all over Tibet for the longest time. Yeah, so the title Dalai Lama is a Mongolian word, Dalai. It's not a Tibetan
mm,
word. It's a Mongol title. So it's one faction of the Mongols deciding to put the fifth Dalai Lama and to put him up as the head of the Tibetans, and so set up the government of the fifth Dalai Lama under the Gelugpa kind of banner. Much earlier, the Sakyapas were gurus to Mongol emperors ruling China. That faction of the Mongols. So basically, Kublai Khan, which is the time of Marco Polo, who maybe did not go to China. I don't know. Kublai Khan was the grandson of Genghis Khan, and Kublai Khan was avid Tibetan Buddhist practitioner who supported the Sakyapas. The same, I think Kublai Khan tried to invite the fifth, maybe, or third Karmapa. Oh no, second, third Karmapa. Yeah, was when the Mongols were active in China. So they tried to also get the Karmapas to go, and they refused or something, and so Pakmo Drupa came to Gampopa, right, as one of the many people who wanted to discredit Gampopa. I mean, generally, he felt like, this is inconsistent. You're saying that, you don't have to practice all of Vajrayana. Then, according to the Sakyapas, if you don't practice all of Vajrayana, how can you be enlightened? So apparently, when he arrived, Gampopa was informed that there's this great Lama, who have come to see you and would like to, have a word with you. And then Gampopa apparently say, okay, let him wait. And so didn't see him for a few days. So then Pakmo Drupa got, a little annoyed. Then when Gampopa finally, asked his students to bring Pakmo Drupa, Gampopa was having lunch and was eating tampa. Yeah, so tampa, you kind of like a doll, right? So you're kind of playing with it. So then Pakmo Drupa came and was a little arrogant, and then he, Gampopa kind of looked up and said, so what do you want? So Pakmo Drupa stated, why he was here and this and that, and started to kind of rattle off, his knowledge and his training and who he is, kind of like. So Gampopa continued to, work on his lunch, and then after Pakmo Drupa, said all he wanted to say, then Gampopa said, so according to your teacher, where are you on the path? Then Pakmo Drupa said, my teacher has certified that I have achieved the first bhumi, the path of seeing. So the first of the 10 bodhisattva levels on the path of seeing. And Gampopa said, is that so? And he said, yes. And then Gampopa said, you see this mouthful of tsampa? And he said to Pakmo Drupa, this mouthful of tsampa has more qualities than your first bhumi. It said that those words like shocked Pakmo Drupa. And somehow, really like completely like, threw him off. That he said, what? And then he became a disciple. Yeah, I think you could kind of see like, like it's not right. It's not just those words, but how it was said and who said it, probably woke Pakmo Drupa up and said, yeah, I'm respected in where I came from, and people look up to me, people praise me, people said, including my teacher, said I'm now on the first bhumi, but in reality, I don't think I'm on the first bhumi, And Gampopa said, My mouthful of Tsampa has more good qualities than your first Bhumi. So it said that Gampopa then, made prostration. I mean, Pakmo Drupa then made prostrations and apologies, and then never went back.
There you go.
Goodness.
So it's quite clear, like in this early period, these early Kagyupas were known for their practice and their realizations. And they were not known for their knowledge and mastery of texts and reconciling contradictions and blah, 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 all those things, Which is not to say that there weren't individuals within the Kagyu family who knew those things. For example, Pakmo Drupa, he knew those, and even Gampopa himself, like the Jewel Ornament of Liberation is quite an impressive text in the amount of quotations and everything that Pakmo Drupa, that Gampopa was able to include in this text. You have to remember that at this point, many people don't remember this. In fact, even my teachers, when I pointed out to them, they're like, "Oh, wow," And this becomes even more impressive, which is that there were no established like Tibetan Buddhist canon at this point. There were no like authoritative set of texts. Like what we now call the Gangyo and the Tengyo, they are much later collections. So there isn't one universally accepted body of texts in the 10th, 11th, 12th century. In fact, it was very difficult to get access to texts, translated texts. It was not easy at all. In fact, today, way easier to get texts. Yeah. And back then, you will hear rumors of like, so and so has a copy of this text, which is mentioned in some other commentary. So people will try to track down this text and to see if it is or it is not, So to be able to possess a lot of texts meant what? Or what is necessary first before you can come into access, before you can access all these texts?
Money.
Money, exactly.
Huh.
And the Sakyapas come from a rich aristocratic family. So they invested their family wealth in the acquisition of texts and thereby control of texts. So they also didn't give, right, these texts easily for others to copy or teach them or transmit them. So the transmission of texts and tradition were, I mean, to put it crudely, were commodities.
Well, that's how Marpa was, right? Marpa went to
Oh
India.
yeah, he famously was a very expensive teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah, famously very expensive, and most people could not afford to be Marpa students. He was heavily criticized by some people, but he could care less. And in his quest for texts, he met many figures who would say to him, how much you're going to pay for this. I know it kind of like doesn't jive with our sensibilities, but it's what happened. So like the Sakyapas, for example, when they went to obtain texts, to get permission to copy texts, So first in Sanskrit, right? And then they would translate them. So after they translated, it's even more precious because most Tibetans can't read the Sanskrit. Then whether they want to share this or not, you know, it's up to them, right? So not only do you get like permission or access to copying texts, but texts without proper transmission are basically dead words. So there are stories of like the Sakyapa family. They are a family, the Sakyapas. I mean, in that sense, the Khon family, Khon. That's their family. So the Khon family, when they went looking for these transmissions, so they went to this border region between Tibet and Nepal, and so they'll meet these like Mahasiddha figures and translator figures and what we might call spiritual entrepreneurs who came up to Tibet. So there were stories like you can find in the Blue Annals, deals that were made, you know meaning what? Meaning, they will say to this Indian or Nepali, okay, how much you want for these texts and the transmission? And they would name a price, right? And followed by the Tibetans going, no, no, too high, too expensive. And so the negotiation would include, okay, we will give you the price that you want on one condition. We have exclusive rights. You cannot teach this to any other Tibetan. We don't care if you teach to other Indians. And deals were made and deals were broken. There's at least one case that I know of, I mean, not like I know of, but I remember reading where they made a deal and then this Nepali or Indian turned around and went and taught another Tibetan.
Made the same deal.
Yeah, made the same deal and said, yep, I won't teach anybody else but you. And then the two Tibetans going back to Tibet, wait a minute.
Sounds kind of shady.
Yes, lots of like things, that happened. And then, of course, whitewashed, so to say, later on, and all made to. So I don't know. When I listen to these stories, I know I apologize if you hear this and you get disappointed, But in my kind of perverted sense of things, I hear these stories. I was like, okay, same old, same old. There is hope for the rest of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because maybe I'm one of those sneaky ones, thinking I'm hopeless. I'm going, actually, no. Like we're not doing too bad, is how I feel.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you if you, and I don't know if it's possible to, but, okay, so all of that happened, 1,000 years ago, maybe,
Mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm.
So what we end up with today, is it possible that what has made it through all of that, plus all of the other turmoil since, in between, what has made it to our hands
Mm-hmm.
is the good stuff,
Mm-hmm.
because it survived
Mm-hmm.
that, all of that, all those shenanigans,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and good-hearted people, preserved with all
Yeah.
their, look at
Yeah.
Chokinima's whole life is about preserving what
Mm-hmm.
he inherited from his father. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's like the most important thing to him, passing it forward, and in all of its truth, without
Right.
distorting it.
Right. Yeah, there's something to be said about longevity,
Yeah.
Um, one of my students, they said, yeah, totally outside the context of Buddhism, there's this, I don't know, there's some sexy term coined about how things that last through time have a certain truth to them, and that's the proof, you know.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So this is also the notion of lineage, you know.
Yeah.
Mm. And sometimes they have disappeared, not necessarily, it's also not definitely, oh, they disappeared because they're not real, you know. But as Tibetans would say, you know, we don't have the karma to continue that. So then the Dakinis took them back.
Yeah.
So that's
You also don't have the burden of theism where you have the word of God
hmm
that you're handing down, which is much more, I mean, obviously, I mean, I don't know, I'm not a biblical scholar, you know, but sure seems like that was manipulated by power and translated for powers and political reasons, and what you have in front of you and the current
hmm
things are, I understand, are historically a little iffy, you know,
There's a lot of those for sure in the Tibetan world.
and Tibetan too.
Oh yes, oh yes. You don't need a all-powerful God for, you know, shenanigans of that type to turn up.
Yeah, I mean, but it just seems to me that if you are actually working off of realization rather than than promissory notes of a reward,
hmm
um, you know, it's like there is a certain amount of insurance that what we have or what we're able to have is dependable. Oh my God, you're wrecking all my dreams, Dr. Lance.
You know,
You're the one who asked about gossip, Nick.
I know, I know.
I mean, there are some really kind of like unsavory characters, you know, like
Well, I know.
that we would rather kind of like forget. And so, yeah, so if you ask me, I would say, and then maybe this is not a traditional answer, and maybe a heresy of sorts, I would say the power of the Dharma is beyond uh, the monkeying around of human beings or whatever beings.
I think that's right.
Even sometimes, you know, the continuity might, for good or for bad, involve some unsavory characters. Mm, that which matters came to us, you know.
Right.
That
Gotcha.
sometimes it even involve, you know, like it passing through the hands of some unsavory characters. And always with the caveat, like they are unsavory characters based on where I'm standing and what I can see, you know, and always leaving some room like I don't see everything, you know. So some humility, you know, in that picture as well, you know, as well as saying, yeah, you know. So I don't need, you know, like I don't need like my dharma lineage and history to be like whitewashed, like, you know, oh, everything was, you know, when in fact, no, it's not. It was always messy, you know. And
Yeah,
I'm okay with the messiness, you know.
yeah. No, I don't know if I was kind of saying that much as like, as you kind of work with the path, it's your own experience that confirms
hmm
the validity of it.
hmm
As far as I might, you know, it's just like I wouldn't be doing it this long if there wasn't something internal going on that was verifying it on some level. As incomplete, as flawed as it is, it feels like that is a distinction that.
Oh,
uh,
I'm just saying, like, I don't think we are superior to the theists in that regard.
Really?
Yes, I think
Okay.
we are equally capable of perverting things and being delusional.
Hmm.
So I don't think we are any better insulated from that. Yeah. You know, people who then claim to speak on behalf of Guru Rinpoche or on behalf of like this Dharmapala or that Dharmapala, you know, it's just a matter of magnitude. But the 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 kind of psychology is, I think, you know, appealing to the same human psychology that fears God or try to bribe God or whatever, you know.
Call it spiritual materialism.
Right, right. Hmm.
Would you mind saying something about the text that we're going to be studying?
Beyond what I said earlier?
Well, that kind of where it fits in the bigger picture.
Say more. Mm,
Um, I know so little about it, I don't know what to ask.
Oh, yeah, that's fine because we're just going to start to learn about it. You know, what I did say is like, you know, it's in the same genre as the Jewel Ornament of Liberation, which is laying out, you know, a set of like foundational matters, the four thoughts that turn the mind, refuge, personal liberation trainings, you know, universal liberation trainings, you know, relative bodhicitta, absolute bodhicitta, resulting in the attainment of the three kayas, you know. So that's the whole range covered by this text.
Okay.
Yeah. And so insofar as it being the, you know, the building blocks of Tibetan Buddhism, I think what he has to say probably no lineage or tradition would pick a fight with, because he's presenting, you know, material that I think everybody goes, yep, 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 yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Um,
I have a kind of just a practical kind of question.
uh-huh.
How should we plan to approach the text on a weekly basis? Should we,
So
um,
for for the purposes of you know, if by the time we meet next, and I'm hoping it's next Sunday, although I cannot promise, if you have read up to page 7, we are pretty good,
okay,
which is the root text in the first chapter. The first
okay,
chapter called Persons and Faith. Second chapter is called The Characteristics of a Guide, a Lama, a Guru. Then the next chapter is called The Difficult to Find Leisures and Endowments, and so on and so forth. So if you look through, you can look through over the text, you know, to get an overview of its, you know, of the different chapters.
mhm,
Then basically, I know Jewel Ornament has 21 chapters. I'm not sure how many chapters this is organized into. Let's see. This has 10 chapters. Chapter 10 is called The Result, the Three Kayas.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so maybe roughly a chapter per week or so?
Oh, no, no, no.
No, is that too fast?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah, so to say even more about these texts, a text like this, and even the Jewel Ornament of Liberation, which has a lot more details in 21 chapters. I've said in the past, I said, I feel that these texts are more like composed for the purpose of being taught rather than for the purpose of being read. Does that make any sense?
You could say more about it,
Sort of.
yeah.
Like this text, it was composed more for someone to use it to teach others rather than for people to read it themselves.
Okay.
Almost like you could say it's the cliff notes for teachers.
Yeah.
So then to the extent that the persons teaching it can make it come alive, with stories and examples and making connections, then you get the fullness of this text.
Dr. Lai, is it also fair to say that it's covering subjects we've heard before from
Yeah.
other teachers?
Yeah,
Like refuge,
totally.
all of that, so it's not like we've never heard any of this, and you may hear the voice of Pema children coming through, or
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So all the other, like especially Tibetan teachers, whatever they teach, it comes from here. It's just that you hear bits and pieces of it and then not really realizing or understanding that they fit into a bigger puzzle. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's very helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, so that answers the question why you're asking us to read this, to give us a more holistic view.
Yeah, I don't know if that's my
Great
answer.
answer.
But that's okay.
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm asking you to read this. That's the truth. But yeah, that's good enough an answer.
We'll find out. We'll find out.
Um, it's hard to know.
So thank you. Are you teaching it to anybody else? Or are we just, are only us?
Not yet,
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I've done it before in the past.
Okay.
So yeah, so now
Okay.
we'll see.
I have a question, but I'm not sure, I'm not sure about it, but my question, since we just finished a long look at Lojong, I wonder about this teaching, this text, and how it relates to Lojong, or how you would position it. Would it be another type of Lojong, or no?
Remember that Lojong in its original transmission was highly restricted.
Right, right.
In fact, it was not to be taught because it could lead people astray. And you're like, what? Wouldn't they make people better people? How can these things lead people astray? Well, it depends on, what you think you're trying to do. In some ways, you could say everyone can get some temporary good from connecting with the Lojong way of expressing the teachings. But the long-term good, of Lojong is not, you can't get it if your Lojong practice is not unfolding within the universe described in a text like what we're going to look at.
Okay, so this is like more foundational.
Foundation in the sense of like, this is the universe, like the
Okay.
givens
Right.
that the Lojong assumes you already know and you already get. So the Lojong teachings are so pithy, and you can extract them and kind of make them work in whatever situation you find yourself in. But it's not necessarily working out in a way that will make you enlightened. It might work out in a way that makes you less stressed, you know, and more kind in the mundane sense of more kind, but that's not necessarily Buddha's kindness, you know. So that's why for the longest time, you know, Lojong, you know, Atisha said, don't teach this publicly. Because until and unless, you know, the Tibetans get these stages of the teachings, you know, then whatever superficial good they think they're getting from practicing Lojong remains superficial.
This seems consistent with your emphasis on getting a grasp on the absolute before you get into the relative.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed to me that Lojong was surprisingly interpersonal, and it's not
Lojong is what?
interpersonal. I was surprised at how much of it was interpersonal.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Right. Right. Yeah. Mm. Yeah, so, you know, in the Kadampa history of Lojong, they were the main holders of Lojong. They didn't teach this until someone was fairly advanced, you know. Or you could also say, you know, that they taught the nuts and bolts because the the less nuts and bolts teachings as found in Lojong will only reveal the true power and extent of power when you apply them within these nuts and bolts context. So somebody was saying how, you know, somebody who didn't really, believe it or not, there are Westerners who encountered Tibetan Buddhism without encountering first Chogyam Trungpa. They are in a minority, but they exist. So this monk who is now in his late 70s, you know, and has been Western monk, has been a monk longer than I've been alive. He said he was surprised, and of course, kind of in a nice way, surprised by how eventually, when he was exposed to Trungpa Rinpoche and what he taught and how he taught to the students, and he was like, it's so surprising to him to hear, like, basically what is considered in his tradition advanced profound teachings given as the ABCs, and then when people are hooked, you know, the nuts and bolts are given, you know. And he's like, oh, that's how they do it.
I've heard that before, yeah.
Yeah. It's like all these special teachings and everything, and you go look into it, it's like, oh, the jewel ornament?
We were told to put that book on our shrine.
Right.
It was wrapped in a kata and put on our shrine.
Yes. Because it's too profound, you know.
Well, I never read it. I never
Yes.
read it, but
Right.
I had shrine. I don't anymore, but
Right.
anyway.
So yeah. So that's anyway, so that's it for today. And
Okay.
Thank you.
my
Thank you so much.
intention is to be my intention is to be here next Sunday to be able to do this. So meanwhile, if you want to be diligent, you could, you know, go look for the corresponding, like the faith and persons chapter, you know.
Mhm.
You could go look for it, you know, in Jewel Ornament, or even Words of My Perfect Teacher by Badu Rinpoche. They cover the same ground, and then in teachings on the Jewel Ornament, I think, like for example, Trungpa Rinpoche has a set of like teachings that were transcribed on his teaching of Jewel Ornament, where he isn't necessarily going, you know, line by line, but he handles the whole topic, you know. So if you want to do a little bit more reading, if you are wanting to be diligent that way, you could certainly do it. Yeah. Okay. Tata.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Goodbye.
Great to see you again. Welcome home.
Yes, welcome back.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have